Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, October 15th, 2021. Time to cough like a maniac before turning on the microphone. Just trying to get everything set and ready to go for today's show. I'll have no help, so, this is the Friday solo shot, which means that, the pathway is clear for us to take on some of the longer form shows, but stop trying to make a plan. I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to grab our interest, capture our imagination, tickle our fancy. I never liked that one. That was a little gross, that one. I don't know. Whatever. And, all right. Well, we're live and ready to go. That's what it says here on my screen because I'm reading this tweet from Bill in Portland that says, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman. Hi, everybody. How are you? I host this show. Patiently explains why the Mansion Cinema Wings demand... Wing. All right, well, anyway, the Mansion Cinema Wings demand for a $50 trillion Build Back Better bill just won't happen when the miserly Warren Sanders wing only wants $3.5 trillion. Sorry, kids. Yeah, why not? We'll spin it that way. Just stand everything on its head and see if it works. The moderate thing to do is to come to an agreement somewhere in the middle and never mind that, one, there's no wing. It's just these two nuts. And two, they totally didn't say that. But we wish that they did. And why not go ahead and just say that they did? And who's going to be any the wiser, really? You haven't even had a chance to read the newspaper yet. How do you know we're wrong? All right. Lots to catch up on. Many things that we could, once again, pull out of the Twitter feed. We went sort of a different direction yesterday. Going with the Twitter story, we got a lot more stories in, a lot more rapid-fire stuff. But I did end up reading through at least the beginning of the fascinating ProPublica piece about the weirdo judge in Rutherford County, Tennessee. And I sort of feel like maybe we want to go back there and check in, read the rest of that, and get a sense. We got a great setup from it. I don't know, maybe we'll just dive right into it and read through as much of it as we can, and then take a couple of current event detours to make sure we're up to speed on things. Because today, there is news. There's developments on the January 6th committee subpoena front. It won't satisfy anybody who wants something done immediately. But there is at least news that they have set a date in the committee, and I think it's next Tuesday, that they'll get together and have a vote to authorize the referral to the DOJ, referral for the contempt of Congress charges that would go along with, at least with Steve Bannon's refusal to appear. I understand that the choice of targeting Bannon, not just because he's weird or the most disgusting or the most annoying or the guy with the most shirts on at any given time, but because Donald Trump's assertion of executive privilege on his behalf is the weakest of all. In addition to Donald Trump not actually being the chief executive anymore and not having the prerogative to invoke executive privilege, he has to rely on the current administration, the Biden administration, to agree to invoke it on his behalf in order for his assertion of it to be official. Although you never know when you take things like that to court and bring them in front of Trump judges. It's always entirely possible that one or more of them will simply say, oh, the meaning of executive privilege is something totally different from what you have understood since time immemorial, or whenever it was that you came to understand this thing. And you've just been wrong about it this whole time, and you didn't know it. Pre-wrong, as I like to call it. You just weren't aware of it. But in addition to the fact that Donald Trump isn't the executive anymore, and there's very little normal basis for allowing for him, even if he were the current executive, to invoke the privilege to cover up evidence of a crime against the United States. There's 2 strikes against his using executive privilege in this situation that a competent court might, in fact, find as reasons not to allow it. But third, that at the time that he was committing the possible crimes, I guess Donald Trump, of course, was a government official when he was committing his crimes. But to the extent that Steve Bannon participated in the planning of those crimes, he did so not as a government employee or as an employee of the president, which would presumably be a public employee, a government employee, but as a private actor of some kind, an informal advisor. So 3 strikes against the invocation of executive privilege here. And let me grab the Hill's article on it, not because the Hill is a great source, but because they put pictures in their tweets, so I can see them very easily, and they give me an idea of what the content of the tweet and the article are about, and boom, it works. So, despite the fact that I'd rather turn elsewhere, and I do have other sources, they win, based on pictures alone. The Hill's morning report, I guess, do you care who sponsored it? They love to put a sponsorship line in there. Do I get paid if I say who sponsored it? No, so forget it. January 6th panel flexes its muscle is the first item at least in the headline of their morning report. Let's see what they've got to say here. House Select Committee will vote Tuesday, so we got the date right, on whether to hold former Trump White House advisor Stephen Bannon in contempt for refusing a Thursday deadline to comply with the panel's subpoena for documents and a deposition. The reason for the, scheduling it on Tuesday, there's a number of reasons. A lot of people were saying, well, why not act now? Just do it now. He's in contempt as of Thursday. That's true. A couple of items that tend to slow things down. If your deadline for response is Thursday, October 14th, one, they feel like they're obligated to wait for all of the 14th to come and go. They'll wait presumably at least until midnight on Friday morning before saying, okay, now we can declare the deadline to have been missed. But also traditionally, prosecutors and others involved in prosecuting the crime of contempt or any subpoena. Any reluctance to, what's the recalcitrance, I guess, in complying with subpoenas is they want to make sure that, it's not just a matter of, I forgot, or, I was late, or I was caught in traffic, for one thing. That's probably not the case with Bannon. So in addition to waiting for the actual day to pass before they declare him to be in contempt, they also will sometimes give a little bit of leeway. Because the judge will ask, were you standing at the courtroom door at 11:59 waiting to rush in here and catch him on a technicality, or were you giving some reasonable chance for compliance, even though he doesn't deserve it and has said he's not going to comply, and you could probably just take him at his word. So very often they'll give a little bit of leeway as well and not be seen rushing into the courtroom doors to file their charges. And of course, the other complicating factor is they're not here in Washington to hold that vote. I don't know whether the committee probably has a rule for dealing with remote voting or proxy voting, perhaps, maybe not proxy voting in the committee, but certainly remote meetings. But it's not an infrequent occurrence for members of Congress to block out basically as one unit a weekend schedule for work at home in the district that includes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And Tuesday is often the travel day back to Washington, D.C., and usually the first opportunity for these kind of committees to meet. If they've got urgent business, they'll travel back on Monday evening, and be ready for Tuesday business. But basically they're just going as business as usual in terms of scheduling the vote. Not because they don't have that sense of urgency or not because they don't sense everyone else having that sense of urgency, but because they're trying to make it look like it's nothing extraordinary. They're not going out of their way to rush things any faster to try to catch him in the contempt. They're just saying, we gave the regular amount of time, waited for the day, and then he didn't show up, and we went through the regular routine of filing the contempt charge, not because we're out to get him or anything like that. There's some optics involved in this. It's super frustrating, and I hated it, but I've hated it for a long time. I mean, I guess, don't forget, I've been watching congressional committees try to compel executive branch testimony while they were in the executive branch, after they left the executive branch, for a long, long time. And it's not a particularly, well-oiled machine. It certainly doesn't move quickly. And that's kind of what I was hoping to, warn about yesterday, and saying, it's going to require some patience. Don't look for anybody to land themselves in jail today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, even Tuesday. Because, of course, once they refer it to the DOJ on Tuesday, and I guess what happens here is, I don't know what the committee rules are. We should probably take a look, or maybe it says in some of these articles. But the ordinary process is that the committee would say, well, they've defied our subpoena. We are going to vote in committee on reporting out a resolution calling on, or stating that the House finds him in contempt. And that will require a House floor vote as well. So they may vote to report the thing out on Tuesday, but it will be, at minimum a day or two before the full House is able to take up the resolution. And depending on how quickly they want to do that, and when Speaker Pelosi thinks it makes sense optically and legally to move that may take a couple of days too. It might not be until Tuesday of the next week. I don't know what the work schedule looks like. That they say, all right, we're not pushing this thing through artificially. The committee asks for expedited consideration, but there are a lot of things that the House of Representatives has to take care of. We'll put it on the calendar. We'll move it. We're not, again, looking to spring the trap necessarily as soon as possible on Bannon. He's just a regular defendant, just like any other. And there's no bias on the part of the House in pushing this faster than they would for anyone else. So anyway, so you have the committee vote on it, then you have the House vote on it, and then there'll be the referral to DOJ. And then who knows what the process is at that point. Like we said, it lands in somebody's inbox, and DOJ, likewise, not looking to make it appear like they're super anxious to prosecute Steve Bannon versus everybody else that they have to prosecute, will move it in good time. And that decision, I guess, is up to, ultimately the Attorney General. I'm sure that the White House will want their hands off of it. Their only role in this that they hope to play is simply, again, reasserting that they don't intend to assert executive privilege on Trump's behalf, at least insofar as Bannon's testimony goes. So it could still take a while, is what we're saying. Let's see. This article says, if approved next week, criminal charges would go to the full House for approval. There's our answer. And eventually, they're into it too, eventually could make their way to the Justice Department for enforcement. The committee says it means business and no one is above the law. That's good. The result, however, could reveal a weak hand in Congress to enforce compliance with subpoenas under unique circumstances. Ordinarily, I'd complain, hey, why do you have to portray it that way in a news article? Except that's actually factually true. Congress has had a weak hand in enforcing compliance with subpoenas under unique circumstances. Is there more to this that is specific to this case? Let's see. No, I guess not. Except update to the Dan Scavino situation. He was actually recently located and served with his subpoena. He wasn't successful in hiding forever. And let's see, who else are... Mark Meadows and Kash Patel, who have gotten their subpoenas, they are, as it says here, said to be, quote, engaging with the committee ahead of the panel's deadlines this week. So I guess, I don't know whether the deadline for everybody was the same day. Maybe not for Scavino. They must have given him extra time. to comply because he was served so much later. Again, they could have, just made the deadline very short, but again, they want to make it look like they're giving him a reasonable chance at compliance before slapping him with the contempt charge. So, all right, I guess that's it for what's in the Hill's morning report about this. And we can cast around. There's a couple other stories on the subject that we might mine for additional information. Maybe we'll do all of that, take care of that stuff in our first segment. And I should stop trying to plan things. It's a little strange. All right, let's see. A couple other stories that are parked in pocket that I would like to at least touch on. Well, let's see. Big controversy yesterday in Twitterland about an NBC News story that I guess was supposed to air last night. And I don't know what to tell you about this one. This one seems pretty weird. Perhaps you saw it. South Lake, Texas is the setting for this one. NBC News reporting South Lake school leader tells teachers to balance Holocaust books with, quote, opposing views. That was very interesting and controversial. Teachers in the Carroll School District say they fear being punished for stocking classrooms with books dealing with racism, slavery, and now the Holocaust. Mike Hicksonbaugh or we may say Mike Hicksonbaugh, perhaps, and Antonia Hilton reporting this for NBC News, a top administrator anyway, with the Carroll Independent School District in South Lake advised teachers last week that if they have a book about the Holocaust in their classroom, they should also offer students access to a book from an, quote, opposing perspective, according to an audio recording obtained by NBC News. That, of course, set off all sorts of speculation. What is an opposing perspective on the Holocaust? I suppose that only Holocaust denial is, qualifies as an opposing view on the Holocaust, I guess. I did see some Twitter people saying, all right, well, so your assignment for today is chapter 1 of the Diary of Anne Frank, but also this 8chan thread started by, what does it say? What the person made up a name for, like a NASCAR fan 6969. So, giving equal weight to everything. Anyway, this woman's name, Gina Peddy, Peddy, and I can't quite tell, there's just not enough information about her to be able to tell whether she's like actually a, serious Holocaust, whether she's seriously open to Holocaust denial as legitimate scholarship, or is just, this is possible, just basically clueless in general, but in particular about the Holocaust. Like I heard it's a bad thing, and even that it's controversial. There are such people. There are like living, functioning adults who really just don't know or understand what was involved here. And a bird has figured it out. Where is that? It was like inside the house. Yeah, this bird is coming from inside. The bird is not inside the house, but probably like right on the deck outside the window here. Shut up, bird. Anyway. Wow, this is a very insistent bird. Somewhere around here we have a chipmunk that's also very insistent that we sometimes hear on the radio. But where was I? I'm totally distracted. Oh, yes, right. Gina Peddy. We don't know whether she's like a real, actually open to Holocaust denialism, or just somebody who has no particular sensitivities, let's say. Come on, this bird is Gina Peddy, apparently trying to butt in. Does anybody recognize the bird call, too? You should identify the bird so that we can quote them for the record. Anyway, not sure whether they just don't have any sensitivities about the Holocaust and just figured, all right, well, the policy is that you're supposed to have a balanced approach to everything. This all, I think, stems from the CRT freakout. And so their approach to it is, well, if you're going to have any materials that are of any in any way controversial. Oh, now you got the door open. That's even worse.
Right here. It's very pretty.
Oh, we'll take a picture and then we can put it in our summary somehow. I can tweet it out. Oh, it's a tweet. Duh. What am I thinking of? Obviously, the real Twitter is outside. Okay. How distracting can you get? Anyway, so let me read on here. Gina Petty, the Carroll School District's Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, made the comment Friday afternoon during a training session on which books teachers can have in classroom libraries. The training came 4 days after the Carroll School Board, responding to a parent's complaint, voted to reprimand a fourth grade teacher who had kept an anti-racism book in her classroom. Obviously, she's got to be stopped. A Carroll staff member secretly recorded the Friday training and shared the audio with NBC News. And I guess the quote from Petty on the audio is, "Just try to remember the concepts of 3979, that is House Bill 3979 from the state legislature," Petty said in the recording, referring to a new Texas law that requires teachers to present multiple perspectives when discussing, quote, widely debated and currently controversial issues. So again, the quote there from the bill, widely debated and currently controversial, close quote, issues. And then Petty continues, and make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, Petty continued, that you have one that has other perspectives. She's not even quite sure how to phrase this thing. And she offers up Holocaust, which I think registers in her mind as, and this is sad, widely debated and currently controversial issues, which it's not. But because she lacks real knowledge and sensitivities, I guess, about the Holocaust, all she knows is, well, people on the internet debate it. And so, and around here, perhaps in Texas, they say it's controversial. I mean, it's as crazy as saying, make sure that if you have a book on gravity, you have an opposing viewpoint in the classroom as well. I mean, it's kind of a settled thing. Do people debate it on the internet? Yes, they do. Should they? No, they shouldn't. But, you ordinarily say, let them, waste their time. Who cares? But it's, this is the real problem with ignoring Holocaust denialism and just saying, well, let it, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to let it fester in its corners, is that it doesn't necessarily convince Gina Petty. I don't know where her brain is on the Holocaust, but I do know, well, I know this. She isn't educated enough to know that that's not something that fits in the category of widely debated and currently controversial issues, despite the fact that denialists will go on the internet and claim that it is and ought to be. A Carolina wren is what's making all the noise outside. I should check Twitter to see whether anybody actually tweeted me that as well. Let's see. Albert Titus, though, asking, did Greg fly down to be live and in person, right? Or he came down with his bird feeder. I bet he knew what I don't know if he had, how good he is at identifying bird calls. But anyway, thanks for looking that up. Okay. Production staff working feverishly in the background. How about feeding them? Does it, maybe that'll shut them up. I don't know. Or, well, actually, if you try to go out there, you'll just chase them away. Anyway, I'm sure everybody's enjoying the visit from the Carolina wren, which, go back to Carolina. Damn it. I'm anti-immigration when it comes to birds. All right. Make room for a Virginia cardinal of some kind. Anyhow, what can I say? We express our disappointment in Gina Petty and hope that she figures out that the Holocaust just doesn't fit in that category. I guess there's an answer, too, from one of the teachers in the group says, well, how do you oppose the Holocaust? I mean, I think we all know that we oppose the Holocaust, but she means how do you present an opposing view on the Holocaust? And Petty, I guess, just as evidence of her confusion on the thing, says, believe me, that's come up, which, one, it shouldn't. Like, she should have said, oh, actually, that's never come up, and the Holocaust doesn't fit in that category at all. But I don't know whether she's lying, it hasn't come up, and she's just floundering for something to say, realizing at this point, oh my God, what did I say the Holocaust for? Or whether it really has come up, which is entirely possible, which is another problem. That means that the rest of the Carroll district leadership is walking around saying and thinking that the Holocaust fits in the category of widely debated and currently controversial issues, which is also problematic. Another teacher wondered aloud if she would have to remove from the shelves of her classroom library Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, or other historical novels that tell the story of the Holocaust from the perspective of victims. It's not clear if Petty heard the question in the commotion or if she answered. Petty did not respond to messages requesting comment. In a written response to a question about Petty's remarks, Carroll spokeswoman Karen Fitzgerald, a real Karen, said the district is trying to help teachers comply with the new state law, and an updated version of that, I guess so, will go into effect in December. Texas Senate Bill 3. Our district recognizes that all Texas teachers are in a precarious position with the latest legal requirements, Fitzgerald wrote, noting that the district's interpretation of the new Texas law requires teachers to provide balanced perspectives, not just during classroom instruction, but in the books that are available to students in class during free time. Our purpose is to support our teachers in ensuring they have all the professional development resources and materials needed. Our district has not and will not mandate books be removed, nor will we mandate that classroom libraries be unavailable. Although apparently the initial response in this district and others was to say, you need to remove all the books you have in your classroom libraries and put them away until they can be individually vetted by the school board. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, I think the Carolina Wren is quieted down a little bit, but we have a Trump-supporting Carolina Wren. It's disrupting everything and is attempting to storm the headquarters in insurrection here. But I think, maybe some food will quiet him down. And got some pictures. I guess we can figure out a way to share them. I'll have to, maybe during the next break, tweet them out. Now I keep reminding him just how bad that joke was now that we're talking about a bird. All right. By the way, along the way in this Texas teacher story, Absinthe tweets to us that maybe now it's time for the Church of Satan to rescue Texas with some other views materials that they could provide, I guess, free of charge to Texas teachers in case there's a Bible in the room or something like that, and you want to make sure that you balance that out, right? Let's see. I'll just continue to read through this story because it was so widely debated yesterday. All right, widely? I forget the language that they were using. And currently, widely debated and currently controversial, or something like that. All right, so could it be the case that they really just don't know what they're doing that badly in Texas? Well, maybe. Fitzgerald said that teachers who are unsure about a specific book should visit with their campus principal, who also won't know what to do, campus team, and curriculum coordinators about appropriate next steps. Clay Robinson, a spokesman for the Texas State Teachers Association, a union representing educators, said there's nothing in the new Texas law explicitly dealing with classroom libraries. Robison, I'm not sure. It's not Robinson. I read it wrong. It's Robison. So let's say Clay Robison. Robison said the book guidelines at Carroll, a suburban school district near Fort Worth, are an overreaction and a misinterpretation of the law. Certainly possible. In fact, I think the bill's authors claim that, at least insofar as the Holocaust goes, this is clearly a misinterpretation. Clearly. I mean, I think that it might even be a correct reading of a stupid bill that's poorly worded, and he doesn't realize it, but I don't know. I haven't read the legislation. Perhaps that's something we ought to do on this show. But we don't know how things are in Texas and how statutory interpretation goes there. Probably poorly, quite honestly. We find it reprehensible for an educator to require a Holocaust denier to get equal treatment with the facts of history, Robeson said. That's absurd. It's worse than absurd, and the law does not require it. So that's good. That's a good position for the teachers union to take, and they should back up anybody who finds themselves in trouble. But I noticed there's less discussion, or at least they've moved the discussion of the fourth grade teacher who did get themselves in trouble down in the story, which I think they sensed that there was more outrage about the Holocaust book causing controversy than there was about quite frankly, than there was about anti-racism causing controversy. I'm going to keep reading because eventually they get to this, right? First, though, State Senator Brian Hughes, an East Texas Republican who wrote Senate Bill 3, the new one coming into effect, denied that the law requires teachers to provide opposing views on what he called matters of, quote, good and evil, or to get rid of books that offer only one perspective on the Holocaust. That's not what the bill says, Hughes said in an interview Wednesday when asked about the Carroll book guidelines. I'm glad we can have this discussion to help elucidate what the bill says, because that's not what the bill says. All right. So that would appear to, that policy, if it were true, or if it was anywhere in the text of the bill, which it probably isn't. I mean, again, it seems to me like what he's saying is, well, when it's an issue of good versus evil, well, then evil doesn't have to have an equal voice in the classroom. Of course, then the fourth grade teacher might say, well, that's why I have the anti-racism book. It's a situation of good versus evil. Anti-racism is good. Racism is evil. So why am I being, singled out here? Why am I in trouble? But he means, well, what he really means there is, well, okay, everybody's pissed off about the Holocaust thing, then it applies to the Holocaust. Church of Satan shows up with materials to balance the Bible or Christian perspective in some other book with materials of their own. No, that's good versus evil. And there, the Church of Satan, I don't know what Satanists, what practicing Satanists are really like. I have no idea. I guess the joke of it would be, they'd say, well, you have us there. We're a church of evil. But I wonder about that. I don't know any Satanists, any serious practicing Satanists. I have questions about whether or not they're like, no, we're evil. That's true. Or whether they would say, well, no, Satan is misunderstood. That's why, we've dedicated ourselves to Boa. And the real good here is Satan. I don't know whether they go on to say, and the evil is God, or no, they're both good. They're just misunderstood and different. I have no idea. Anybody a Satanist want to answer that question? I can't promise you equal time. It's not Texas. This is a radio show. I can, however, offer equal time to other birds and other bird species. I think I'm forced to at this point. So if there's a Tennessee wren, what other kind of wrens are there? What other states have wrens? Bird experts, do you know? I'll have to put out feelers here to try and find one to step up and speak to the issues. Where were we, though? Yes, right. 6 Carroll teachers, including 4 who were in the room to hear Petty's remarks, spoke to NBC News on the condition of anonymity, worried that they would be punished for discussing their concerns publicly. They said district leaders have sent mixed messages about which books are appropriate in classrooms and what actions they should be taking. Teachers are literally afraid that we're going to be punished for having books in our classes, an elementary school teacher said, because someone did get punished for that. There are no children's books that show the opposing perspective of the Holocaust or the opposing perspective of slavery. Are we supposed to get rid of all the books on those subjects? I guess one Carroll teacher's response is illustrated here in a photo obtained by NBC News of their decision to block off their classroom library with caution tape. Caution, do not enter. partly in response to the actual stupid policy, and partly, I'm sure, as protest, but a valid protest nonetheless. Carroll Superintendent Lane Ledbetter later posted on the Facebook page of Carroll ISD, and again, problematic, different reasons that school districts use for the dissemination of their official policy and interpretations of official policy, Facebook, which is a platform that nobody should have anything to do with anymore. We're going to have to migrate away from it. Anyway, put it on Facebook that comments made during the conversation with teachers in last week's meetings were in no way to convey that the Holocaust was anything less than a terrible event in history, but maybe also a great event in history. Additionally, we recognize there are not two sides of the Holocaust, he wrote in the post, as we continue to work through implementation of HB 3979. And why bother? Because Texas Bill 3 is coming instead of Senate Bill 3. We also understand this bill does not require an opposing viewpoint on historical facts, he added, referring to the new Texas law. Well, that's a good interpretation. It's the only possible interpretation. Because there's a lot of books that just, like we said, there won't be any opposing views available that are reputably published anyway, and maybe just not published at all. And does that mean you have to get rid of books about everything that is accepted fact, which sounds like a very bad idea for an educational environment? It also highlights the absurdity of the whole thing, as I was wondering yesterday. Doesn't this new policy also require, if you're going to follow the policy for balance, shouldn't you also be required to not follow the policy at the same time, right? Like, why don't we have any books? Well, here's why. It's the text of House Bill 3979. But my having given that to you, I am now required to give you the text of something else that says that this is not the law and this will not be our policy, just so that you have an opposing perspective on House Bill 3979, because otherwise I'm in trouble. The debate in South Lake over which books should be allowed in schools is part of a broader national movement led by parents, sort of, opposed to lessons on racism, history, and LGBTQ issues that some conservatives have falsely branded as critical race theory. A group of South Lake parents has been fighting for more than a year to block new diversity and inclusion programs at Carroll, one of the top-ranked school districts in Texas. Late last year, one of those parents complained when her daughter brought home a copy of This Book is Anti-Racist by Tiffany Jewell from her fourth grade teacher's class library. The mother also complained about how the teacher responded to her concerns. Carroll administrators investigated and decided against disciplining the teacher, but last week, on October 4th, the Carroll School Board, courageous people, voted 3-2 to overturn the district's decision and instead formally reprimanded the teacher, setting off unease among Carroll teachers who said they fear the board won't protect them if a parent complains about a book in their class. And they're correct, because they won't. That's what they just did. So here is an anti-racist book. What's the opposing perspective for anti-racism that would have saved this teacher from reprimand? Presumably racist books. So that's what you got to do now to avoid reprimand, but not the Holocaust, apparently. That they deny. But anti-racism, well, the only solution is go get some racism and put it on the shelves. Teachers grew more concerned last Thursday, October 7th, when Carroll administrators sent an email directing them to close their classroom libraries, quote, until they can be vetted by the teacher. Now, presumably the teacher that opened the classroom library vetted those books. Should I put this book in here? I mean, they don't get handed books at random with demands that they be put on there. I don't have time to read it. I'll put it on there. I don't know what it is. It's pornography. Let's put it there. But whatever. Another email sent to teachers that day included a rubric, they love rubrics, that asked them to grade books based on whether they provide multiple perspectives and to set aside any that present singular dominant narratives, quote, in such a way that it, ellipsis, may be considered offensive, unquote. That's pretty vague, and it's going to get a lot of people in trouble. In a statement, Fitzgerald, the district spokeswoman, said the training session was planned weeks ago in response to the new Texas law and was not related to the school board's vote to reprimand a teacher. That could be. Fitzgerald acknowledged that the timing of the board's disciplinary vote and the release of new class library guidelines caused confusion and worry among teachers, but the district's inconsistent messaging to staff members and parents since then has also caused confusion, teachers said. See, Greg was right about needing consistent information from any authority, health-wise or otherwise. Last Friday, after NBC News published an article detailing the district's book instructions and plans for staff training that afternoon, Carroll Superintendent Ledbetter sent an email to parents denying that the district was asking teachers to remove books, even though the district had instructed teachers a day earlier to close their classroom libraries until every book could be vetted. So the only thing you can do is, you're not supposed to remove the books, but you must close your library. The teacher with the caution tape has the right idea. I would like to take this opportunity to set the record straight. Oh well, too bad that didn't happen. Ledbetter wrote on Friday in notes. This to the rest of the thing is, well, I would like to take this opportunity to set the record straight and take this opportunity out of the room, beat it to death, and bury it in the backyard. Thank you. There. Now I've taken the opportunity, not used it. I'm just getting rid of it. But this is what he says instead. Where were we? The district has not mandated that any book be removed from teachers' classroom libraries. Additionally, the district has not provided any training on removing books. Whatever. About an hour before Ledbetter's note went out Friday afternoon, Carroll teachers were receiving a different message, according to the audio of the training session recorded by a staff member and shared with NBC News. That would be Petty's pronouncements. The information we have right now is that classroom libraries cannot be used until they have been vetted. An assistant principal could be heard telling a group of elementary school teachers, instructing them to use the rubric sent by the district to determine which books are appropriate. So, you do need to go back to school and separate the books that have been vetted, and those books need to be available to students. The other ones do not need to be available to students until they have been vetted. That's some good weasel words there. They do not need to be available. What they mean is, should not be made available, but they don't want to say that. Until they've been vetted. Right, sure. I don't know. This one here is the Sesame Street book here. Is that vetted or not? I don't know. Yes, it is. A teacher can be heard arguing that the guidelines shared by the district for determining the appropriateness of classroom books are too subjective. They are. They're printed herein, and you can review them. It's a big chart and lots of verbiage and quite a mess. And I don't know. Any rubric, of course, is going to be graded subjectively. Like you're supposed to give points based on, does it have multiple perspectives? Well, yes, no, 1 point, 2 points, I don't know. Anyway, teacher is arguing about that. Another said she didn't feel safe keeping any books in her classroom following the school board's vote to reprimand one of her colleagues. After 30 minutes, Petty, the district's director of curriculum and instruction, arrived at the training. She came late, I guess, and tried to reassure the teachers, and then blurted out, blah, 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 Holocaust. So that didn't work. She told them not to worry and that district leaders supported them. And also, I don't know what the Holocaust is. We're in the middle of a political mess, Petty said in the recording. Start off, well, that's a strong start. Acknowledging that teachers are afraid. And you are in the middle of a political mess, and so we just have to do the best we can. That's a fine start. So that's amazing. We'll do the best we can. All right, well, what's your best? I don't know anything about the Holocaust. Maybe you should get rid of those books. Oh, crap. Well, I would have guessed that was the worst you could do, but as it turns out, it's your best. Petty then told the teachers to hold off on closing their class libraries, according to the recording. She said she was expecting Fitzgerald, the district spokeswoman, to send out a statement in response to the NBC News article from that morning. There's a general statement coming out from the district, Petty said in the recording. I have no idea what it's going to say. I also have no idea what the Holocaust is, so that's consistent. And so I think we need to wait and see what that says, and then we come back and determine how and what your library classrooms are going to look like. Shelves with books. After several teachers complained in the recording about the changing messages, Petty told them she was going to step aside to call another district leader, Deputy Superintendent Courtney Carpenter, to ask for clarification. See how this goes. Petty returned a few minutes later and blurted out Holocaust. So I wonder if she's trying to blame Courtney Carpenter for this. Anyway, she comes back a few minutes later. According to teachers who were there, in the audio, Petty explained that teachers should be working to ensure that the books in their classes present opposing viewpoints, so that the kids are confused, and offered the Holocaust as an example. Maybe it was Carpenter. Based on her call with Carpenter, Petty said teachers should disregard the earlier instructions to close their class libraries as they worked to read through all of their books, which she acknowledged could take weeks. Carpenter did not respond to a message requesting comment. Fitzgerald said the Holocaust example given by Petty did not come from Carpenter. Okay. I knew so they were clear about my confusion about that one. I do know that you feel like it's putting you at risk, Petty told teachers on the recording. I do know that. But I also know that we're going to do what's best for our kids. And we're going to stand behind you on this. Push you off the cliff. The recorder was still running a few minutes later after the session had ended, as a group of teachers gathered in a hallway and discussed what they had just heard. And one quote says, "I am offended as hell by somebody who says I should have an opposing view to the Holocaust in my library," a teacher said, her voice quavering. Another replied, "They don't understand what they have done, and they are going to lose incredible teachers, myself potentially being with them." Unquote. And that's the end of the article, and I don't know whether she's saying, I'm an incredible teacher. Maybe. Good for you. Have confidence in yourself. Or you're going to lose some incredible teachers and also me, which, I think you need a better self-image, perhaps. I'm sure you're doing good work. It's bizarre. It's stupid. It's still, I think, evidences of major misunderstanding of what the Holocaust is and how to treat it. And I can see that they're backpedaling now, but okay, well, that's where you are. I would look for other districts to have the same problem, even after reading this article. So be aware of that. I know that's happening. Let's see. Other things that I wanted to share with you. Gosh, there's a lot. Maybe this before the top of the hour break. The New Republic. Daniel Strauss publishing an intriguing view of Jeffrey Clark and just what he's all about under the title of, well, who is Jeffrey Clark and how did he try to destroy democracy? And the answer is very aggressively. But we kind of know what he was up to, but I'm interested in what would move this new profile. And I did see some tweeted excerpts from the story. Sounds like one perhaps we would do well to read just to keep up to speed on what they're finding out about him. The subheader on this piece, the January 6th Commission's latest subpoena, it's not a commission, it's a committee, but whatever. Latest subpoena target was willing to become Trump's attorney general, we know this, and help him invalidate the election. He spent a career preparing for that moment. Here's the background that we need on this guy. Why they can't get right that it's a commission, or a committee and not a commission in this text, I don't know. But anyway, on Wednesday, the House Select Committee, correct, to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol, subpoenaed Jeffrey Clark, the former acting assistant attorney general for the Civil Division of the Justice Department in the Trump administration's waning days. That is a long title. The subpoena was the latest of 19 subpoenas targeting former Trump administration officials by the Congressional Investigative Panel. It was also the result of a report from the Senate Judiciary Committee, which said Clark was instrumental in President Trump's push to spread his unsubstantiated voter fraud claims. Clark declined to participate in a sit-down for that report. In other words, much as Clark became a central figure in Trump's scheming to undermine the 2020 election results, he is also becoming a central figure in congressional investigators' probe of the attack on the Capitol and the lead up to it. Specifically, investigators say that Clark drafted a letter that would have gone to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and state legislators there and elsewhere, urging them to delay certifying election results until the Justice Department had thoroughly investigated alleged voter fraud. Trump also considered removing Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and replacing him with Clark, who was more willing to follow Trump's lead in attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Representative Scott Perry, an outspoken Trump loyalist, urged acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue to have Clark pay more attention to how the Justice Department was investigating the allegations of voter fraud, the Senate report said. Put more simply, Clark was willing to become the Attorney General of the United States and use that perch to spread lies about allegations of voter fraud with no basis in evidence, and then use those lies to launch official investigations. The report's findings and Clark's professional background show he is the type of elite Republican lawyer whom conservative lawmakers depend on when the American legal system is the focus. A Philadelphia native, Clark is one of those Washington lawyers with elite academic credentials, an undergraduate degree in history and economics from Harvard, a master's in urban affairs and public policy from the University of Delaware's Public Policy School. I mean, no offense to University of Delaware, and that school, of course, ironically now named after Biden, as they note in parentheses here. But I don't know if I would, put them up there with Harvard, but maybe it's the best that Delaware has to offer. So there's that. And we like Delaware. What else? Also a law degree. That would be helpful if you're going to work in the Justice Department. Where's it from? Georgetown University Law School. He spent years at the hard-charging law firm Kirkland & Ellis, the legal shop that housed Ken Starr, John Bolton, Bush administration Solicitor General Paul Clement, Brett Kavanaugh, Jeffrey Rosen, who was still at the DOJ at the time, right? John Eastman, who wrote the terrible memo, Pat Cipollone, whose name we never learned to pronounce, and former Trump Attorney General William Barr, among a who's who list of attorneys. That is some list, isn't it? Who went to work in conservative administrations. The firm has employed attorneys who became Democratic lawmakers as well. So there's a little bit of that. The firm's clientele list includes BP, British Petroleum, right? General Motors, Jeffrey Epstein. This is a hell of a list all by itself. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, we have our disagreements over things, but really, General Motors and Jeffrey Epstein. What am I supposed to make of that? And the Brown and Williamson Tobacco Company. Well, okay. A report from the Revolving Door Project detailed Kirkland & Ellis's history of employing lawyers who would eventually work in the federal government, as well as the firm's extensive list of right-wing connections. That's in quotes there, but who are they? Well, for instance, Robert Bork was a Kirkland & Ellis alum before going on to almost snag a seat on the Supreme Court. The ties between conservative jurisprudence and Kirkland extend beyond Kavanaugh and Bork. Former Kirkland partner and Bush DOJ lawyer Viet Din is a prominent conservative legal scholar, best known as one of the lead architects of the Patriot Act, which dramatically increased law enforcement funding and surveillance in the name of fighting terrorism, the Revolving Door report said. Din left Kirkland in 2018 to become Fox Corporation's chief legal and policy executive. The firm also produced the folks who helped defend Trump in a defamation lawsuit about E. Jean Carroll's rape allegations. During his time at Kirkland & Ellis, Clark represented relatives of Elian Gonzalez during the controversy over Gonzalez's custody. That was an intensely partisan battle during the later Clinton years over whether Gonzalez, a small Cuban boy, I think we should say young Cuban boy perhaps, let's not make fun of his height. A small Cuban boy, it says, whose mother had drowned trying to bring him to America, and whether he should be repatriated to his father in Cuba, which Clinton did. Clark was an adjunct professor at George Mason University's School of Law. I don't know anybody who goes there. Those people are stupid. In 2016, the Koch Foundation and an anonymous donor offered a $30 million donation for the school to rename itself, this is true, the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University, as it is now known. I don't know why that was worth it to them, but, set more money on fire. Go ahead. He clerked for Appellate Judge Danny J. Boggs, a Federalist Society-connected conservative judge who made George W. Bush's short list for the Supreme Court, but never made it, I guess. Clark served as an energy policy advisor for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. I don't know what his background in energy policy is, but that's what he did. During that campaign, Romney was eager to respond to questions on energy policy by talking about opening up more land for oil and gas drilling. Fairly standard Republican stuff, though. That's the problem. It is standard Republican stuff. Unlike Romney or the former presidential candidate's top advisors, Clark had no problem working for Trump after the 2016 election. From 2018 to just a week short of the end of Trump's time in office, Clark worked as the Assistant Attorney General for the Environment and Natural Resources Division. Sounds bad already. And concurrently, the Civil Division. Bloomberg Law described his tenure at Energy and Natural Resources as characterized by, quote, championing the Trump administration's deregulatory agenda and revamping policies that guide environmental settlements and internal processes. At one point during his most recent time at the Justice Department, Clark found himself at the center of the legal community's attention for letting his bar license lapse. I mean, that's actually difficult to do. I mean, you just got to ignore stuff. I guess it's not that difficult. But I mean, they send me all sorts of notices all the time, and I just don't let it lapse. And I don't even practice. Clark's long history with Kirkland and Ellis, he did 2 stints there, 96 to 2001, and then 05 to 18, didn't help his job prospects after the Trump administration, so I guess that's getting in the way of his soft landing. He was described in the law community as radioactive by a consultant for the legal industry in a Bloomberg News article, and was one of the former Trump administration officials bucking the trend of returning to prior institutions with more fanfare. Instead, Clark joined a nonprofit called the New Civil Liberties Alliance, or NCLA, which describes itself as a nonprofit civil rights organization which protects constitutional freedoms from violations of the administrative state. It's an organization that's fought a Securities and Exchange Commission rule requiring companies to list board diversity statistics, for instance. Also been involved in representing a client in a fight about vaccine mandates. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's finish up this article. I don't think there's too much left to it. So yes, as I mentioned, involved in a fight against vaccine mandates, in particular the vaccine mandates at Michigan State University, in case you were there or nearby or an alum or a fan and would like to blame someone for that. The NCLA trumpeted Clark's hiring, but more recently his august title at the organization, which is funny because I think he was only briefly hired, and maybe during the month of August was when he served at NCLA, but they mean lowercase a, august title, as opposed to the title that he enjoyed in August and no other month. Chief Litigation and Director of Strategy, that title was, and bio page have coincidentally disappeared, as we mentioned yesterday. His connections to the firm seem to have been scrubbed recently as well. That's really surprising. Kirkland should probably stand by him. They have plenty of members of the Rogues Gallery still on their rolls. But, you know, he did try to lead an insurrection. Anyway, to watchdog groups, Clark has been a person of interest for months. In August, with the capital A, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington urged Attorney General Merrick Garland to look into whether Clark broke federal law for following Trump in trying to use the Justice Department to cast doubt on the 2020 election results. In the Judiciary Committee report, Chairman Dick Durbin has also urged the D.C. Bar Association to, quote, open an investigation into Jeffrey Clark's compliance with applicable rules of professional conduct. Those rules bar a lawyer from advising clients in helping to orchestrate fraud or other crimes. And now, Clark is the newest high-ranking Trump administration official, and perhaps more importantly, Justice Department official, under intense scrutiny by the House Investigatory Committee. He has until October 29th, in case you were wondering on his deadline, to produce documents and come forward for a deposition for the committee. It's not clear whether Clark will comply, as Trump has ordered others not to. The fact that Clark finds himself subpoenaed and under scrutiny by multiple congressional investigations underscores the lengths Trump and his allies were willing to go to try to twist. They really should have 2 twos in there, but willing to go to try to twist the American voting system to his whims. They were, the investigations so far suggest, willing to use the Justice Department to advance Trump's political agenda. supposedly a no-no, right? There's no sign that Clark's long legal background caused him to hesitate for even a moment. That should be no surprise. For most of Clark's career, from clerkships to advising the Republican nominee for president to working at one of the most elite law firms in the country, he's opted for the type of legal training and experience that would make him essential in Trump's move to attack the American democratic process. Clark is not the only one to take this approach. He's just the one who's now in the spotlight. Okay, I like that conclusion. Good point at the end by Daniel Strauss. Glad to have been able to share that with you. Let's see, other items in pocket that might require current attention. Let me just make you aware of this. I don't know if there's any analysis to it, but the Associated Press reporting that this is going on. I thought I might bring you up to speed. Where were we? Lev Parnas. You remember Lev Parnas? Originally we were introduced to Lev Parnas as one of the two Ukrainian Americans assisting Rudy Giuliani in his search for dirt on Joe Biden. He has since appears to have flipped and realizes he was on the losing side of all this. Anyway, his trial is underway, and there's some news from that. AP reporters Larry Neumeister and Tom Hayes reporting prosecutor, so the prosecutor says, foreigner-fueled Giuliani Associates donations, the Giuliani Associate being Lev Parnas. Lawyers opened the trial of an associate of Rudy Giuliani on Wednesday with plenty of talk about $1 million, I'm sure they said it that way, from a Russian financier that prosecutors contend was aimed at illegally influencing U.S. politicians, but there was little mention of Giuliani and other prominent political figures whose names will arise later in the trial. Can't really do that in opening statements until you can't do that in opening statements. You can't discuss those things until the foundation has been laid for them. So, tight controls on what you do in opening statements. Anyway, I had real trouble with those things, by the way, in law school and in our trial advocacy classes, and when we had mock trials in our first couple practices, I had real difficulty not jumping to the conclusions that I really wanted people to hear, because I know where this is going. But yeah, they teach you to methodically lay this stuff out. There's certain things you can claim, certain things you can't in an opening statement. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there. Anyway, so yes, $1 million was handed over by Russian financiers with the purpose of trying to influence American elections, which, of course, we were just discussing the other day, right? Mitch McConnell aide, whose name escapes me, but who's under investigation in two separate investigations. One for trying to steer a Russian's money into American politics illegally, and the other for attempting to steer what he thought was a Chinese national's money into American politics. So taking the money from Russia and China and laundering it and trying to use it to influence American politics. Of course, he got caught on you might recall, on the China issue when it turned out that the Chinese national he thought he was laundering money for was actually a couple of British reporters. Whoops. Anyway, so obviously a widespread problem here. And in this particular instance, it's Lev Parnas trying to do the laundering. As it turns out, only about $100,000 of the $1 million, 10%, ever made it into the hands of U.S. politicians, prosecutors say, although I wouldn't be surprised if more was in the hands of ex-politicians. But anyway, that's interesting too. I'd like to know what happened to 90% of the money. The trial of Lev Parnas and not Igor Fruman, but Andrei Kukushkin began a day after jury selection with claims by Assistant U.S. Attorney Aline, A-L-I-N-E, Floder, F-L-O-D-R, that the men conspired to hide illegal foreign campaign contributions made with money from Andrei Muravyev. I don't think we've heard of him yet. She called Muravyev a Russian tycoon and said Parnas referred to Muravyev as Big Andre, as he made connections with movers and shakers in the political world. That is what secret foreign money infiltrating American elections looks like. That is why we are here. It's a typo. It says why we're here. But I know they meant that is why we are here. That is what this trial is all about. Floder, I don't know how she pronounces it. Is it he? She? I don't know. What was the name? Eileen? I thought it might perhaps be a woman, but I don't know. Guess I should check these things out. Anyway, that's what the prosecutor told the Manhattan federal jury. The first trial witness, Wesley Duncan, a Republican candidate for Attorney General in Nevada in 2018, testified that he returned $10,000 that Parnas had donated to his campaign because his campaign believed it was illegal. You remember way back when we were first learning about Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman and what they were doing, and they were interested in, there was some small potato stuff compared to getting wrapped up in Trump world eventually. But you remember that they were trying to start a cannabis business in Nevada, and that's, I guess, why they were donating $10,000 to a Republican candidate for Attorney General in the state. Well, anyway, Duncan says, as soon as we found out, we sent it back. Duncan also testified he once turned down an invitation from Parnas to fly to an event in a private jet. Floder portrayed Parnas, 49, as a man who tried to live large on the money of others. Oh, I'd love to do that. Passing himself off as a wealthy and connected political donor. Attorney Joseph Bondi said that Parnas, his client, was not guilty and that some of his work was on behalf of a natural gas pipeline deal he pursued. That's what he was trying to do with Ukraine. That was his cover, anyway, when he went back there on Giuliani's behalf. That's what the evidence in this case will show you. He didn't knowingly, willfully violate any federal election laws, he told jurors. I think he might have. Kukushkin's attorney, Gerald Lefcourt, also said the prosecutor had it wrong, telling jurors that if they follow the evidence, you'll have no trouble in finding Mr. Kukushkin not guilty. I don't know. He said Kukushkin, born in Ukraine, believe it or not, in 1973, was primarily interested in expanding his legal marijuana business in California and had teamed up with Muravyev to do so after the pair met while both were studying at a U.S. school. Kukushkin, who became a U.S. citizen at age 26 and settled in San Francisco, was thought of by his supposed co-conspirators as a, quote, rube, unsophisticated, inexperienced, not knowing what he's doing, Lefcourt said. That's his attorney. Throughout the openings, prosecutors and defense lawyers made a few references to Giuliani, whom Parnas aided in his efforts to persuade the government of Ukraine to investigate the son of then presidential candidate Joe Biden. Bondi did cite Parnas's relationship with America's mayor, a reference to Giuliani's years as New York City's mayor. And he noted that Parnas, a Florida businessman, had traveled to campaign events with Giuliani. Giuliani is not charged in the case, and prosecutors haven't alleged that he knew anything about illegal campaign contributions, but Manhattan federal authorities seized his electronics devices in an April raid, and are looking into his activities related to Ukraine to see if he violated a law requiring a person to register as a foreign agent for certain activities. Giuliani has maintained anything he did was in his capacity as a personal attorney to then President Donald Trump. So I don't know if that's going to help him any, but that's what he maintains. All right, that's the end of it. I just wanted to sort of note for the record that Lev Parnas's trial has begun, and how he's presenting himself to juries at this point. Let's see. Other things to note for the record and catching up on the news. All right. How about this from the Washington Post? You'll remember this person. Colorado County Clerk who embraced conspiracy theories is barred from overseeing elections. Emma Brown reporting for the Washington Post. Just 2 days ago, a Colorado judge on Wednesday prohibited a local official who has embraced conspiracy theories from overseeing November's election, finding she breached and neglected her duties and was untruthful when she brought in someone who was not a county employee to copy the hard drives of Dominion voting systems machines. You remember the Mesa County clerk, Tina Peters, who was caught snooping around, I guess she had the keys so she didn't quite break into, but went into the storage facility and just brought these unauthorized other personnel with her to copy the drives of the voting machines. We mentioned that a while ago. The effort by Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters, a Republican, is listed here that way, to ferret out supposedly hidden evidence of fraud amounted to an escalation in the attacks on the nation's voting system. According to experts, one in which officials who were responsible for election security allegedly took actions that undermined that security in the name of protecting it. Like the way the Texas governor said, mandates are bad, so I'm going to mandate a mandate against mandates. Secretary of State Gina Griswold, a Democrat, filed a lawsuit in August seeking to formally strip Peters of her election duties after passwords for Mesa County's voting machines were posted online, and copies of the hard drives were presented at a symposium hosted by MyPillow executive Mike Lindell, who denies that President Biden won the 2020 election. Judge Valerie J. Robeson, another Robeson, found Peters and her deputy, Belinda Knisley, K-N, like knife, K-N-I-S-L-E-Y, Belinda Knisley, had falsely represented that a man named, quote, Gerald Wood, who I guess isn't his real name, was a county employee. So falsely representing that this so-called Gerald Wood was a county employee so that he would be allowed to attend a manual software update for the Dominion machines, a closely guarded process known as a, quote, trusted build. Well, don't trust it anymore. The confidential voting machine passwords were photographed during the trusted build, Robeson wrote. In addition, she wrote, Peters allowed Wood to make copies of the Dominion hard drives before and after the trusted build. And an investigation by state officials months later, after the passwords appeared online, found that 2 settings on a county Dominion server had been changed, giving rise to a potential security vulnerability. Dozens of pieces of election equipment had to be decertified and could no longer be used. So all the hacking and fraud that everyone accuses Dominion of is actually the people who are doing the accusations are the ones breaking in and hacking things and then saying, Dominion did it. Robeson wrote that Peters and Knisley were both unable or unwilling to appropriately perform the duties of the county's chief elections official. She granted a request from Griswold and Mesa County's commissioners to confirm Wayne Williams, a former Secretary of State, as the county's designated elections official for an upcoming vote on November 2nd. So, by the way, I'm glad this happened. And let me just say this to the dotard president, who's really good at getting stuff done or whatever. His big plans, and it's still a danger, so watch out. But the big plans to replace current elections officials with people who are willing to cheat on his behalf is going great. He had one in place already in Mesa County and got her thrown out by a judge and replaced by somebody who wasn't willing to cheat on his behalf. So far he's 0-1 in these efforts. But, keep an eye out there. Things could turn around. Griswold, whose office supervises elections run by county clerks, welcomed the judge's decision on Wednesday, saying it bars Peters from further threatening the integrity of Mesa's elections and ensures Mesa County residents have the secure and accessible election they deserve. Well, they have a better shot at it now anyway. They still have to replace those machines. The county commissioners intervened in the case in order to endorse stripping Peters and Knisley of their election duties. In a statement on Wednesday, Commissioner Cody Davis said that ballots in the upcoming election would be posted online and tabulated 3 ways to reassure voters. There has been a large shadow cast over the integrity of our elections here in Mesa County, and we have a lot of work to do to restore that trust, he said. Scott Gessler, a lawyer for Peters and Knisley, had argued that Griswold did not have the power to strip them of their duties. Well, no, she doesn't. She went to court to ask somebody who did. That's dumb. In a statement, Peters said she is disappointed with the court's decision and plans to appeal. She called Griswold's lawsuit a power grab, meant to serve as a warning to all other potential whistleblowers who break into the storage facilities and bring unauthorized personnel to illegally copy the contents of the hard drives of voting machines. What a jackass. In recent weeks, Peters had said that she hired a, quote, consultant to make copies of Dominion hard drives before and after the trusted build, claiming that doing so was necessary to ensure that the trusted build did not erase files needed to fully investigate the 2020 election. But when the trusted build took place in May, she introduced Wood to state officials as an administrative assistant in her office and allowed him access to elections rooms that are supposed to be restricted to employees who have undergone background checks, Robeson wrote. The local district attorney, state prosecutors, and the FBI are investigating whether criminal charges are warranted in connection with the voting machine breach. They are, just to give some real courtroom authority to my answer on that question. All right, let's see. Other items in Pocket that demand immediate attention, or are we mostly caught up on the Pocket stuff? I think so. Lots more commentary on items that I would share with you if I had the time, and maybe we will. But I think I would like then to go back to the ProPublica story that we were reading from yesterday, even though many of you doubtless took my suggestion that you continue reading it on your own, but maybe you didn't, and maybe you rely on us here to read you these things. Although, quite honestly, well, is this one of them? No, I don't think so. But a lot of times, some of the things that we read here are actually available as podcasts from the publisher of the original article. And if you didn't want to read it, but rather enjoyed having someone read it to you, and I didn't finish, you could use their version of it. We left off, I think, having read, I'll remind you of the various chapters of this very long story. There was the chapter 1, What in the World, where they discussed the very bizarre circumstances of the arrests made at Hobgood Elementary School in, where were we? In Murfreesboro, Tennessee, when they arrested 3 young girls in elementary school, and they had originally sought to arrest 4 of them, for the non-existent crime of having witnessed a fight between some boys and not done anything, allegedly, not done anything to stop the fight, which they're not obligated to do, for one thing, and isn't a crime in any case. And the cops that were sent to make the arrests had no idea why they were being sent and could not understand why they were being asked to do this and didn't want anything to do with it. And in fact, the cops that they originally were assigning to do the job were so disturbed by the circumstances that they refused to show up for work that day. So the other cops that they sent in their place, 1, were clueless about what was going on, and 2, with only one exception, also wanted to refuse to carry out these orders, but eventually did. Then we got to chapter 2, which is about the weirdo judge that sort of runs the county and certainly runs the juvenile justice system there, and who calls herself the mother of the county. And we're talking about Judge Donna Scott Davenport. How far into this did we get? We were reading basically about her weird courtroom demeanor and her total dominance of the system, and the fact that because you're dealing with juveniles, a lot of the records are shielded and a lot of the procedure is shielded, and there's no jury involved in courtroom proceedings there. So it just leaves Judge Davenport more or less on her own and subject to no oversight or scrutiny whatsoever. And so she's just become this weird, petty tyrant. But, you know, she argues, well, as she says, children need consequences. Being detained in our facility is not a picnic at all. It's not supposed to be. It's a consequence for an action. And I told you that embedded in one of these articles, or perhaps in one of the threads on Twitter touting this article, I can't remember what led me to it, but it was a weird promotional video for the Rutherford County juvenile detention facility, like selling it as, you know, if your county can't afford to build its own state-of-the-art juvenile detention facility, you can pay us to store your juvenile delinquents, which was a kind of a weird pitch, but I guess it happens in counties like that where the budget doesn't necessarily support having a juvenile detention facility. So I think we left off there and telling people to look out for that video, and didn't yet read this part. Davenport's tough talk and the county's high detention rate. You might recall that neighboring counties throughout Tennessee were incarcerating some 5% of their juvenile offenders, whereas they were doing in the high 40s, or was it 48% or something like that, in Rutherford County. So that accounts for the mention of the high detention rate. So Davenport's tough talk and the county's high detention rate go against a reform movement that started at about the same time that she went on the bench. She went in the opposite direction. Beginning in the late 1990s, the number of kids in lockup began to decline, both nationally and in Tennessee. Davenport, now 69, grew up in Mount Juliet, a Nashville suburb. She attended Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, majoring in criminal justice. On the radio, remember she does a radio show, Davenport says she has been blessed with an extensive history in law enforcement. I was trained well in 17 years by different law enforcement agencies. As a juvenile court judge, she says she can spot subtle signs of gang activity, wearing something to the left or to the right, or a color here or a color there. So she can interpret the signs, and her beautiful mind will tell people whether they are gang members or not. Her description of her job history doesn't always match employment records, they point out. Davenport, in a sworn deposition, said her law enforcement career began in 1977 at MTSU, where, as a student, she worked full-time as a university police officer for 2 to 3 years. But her MTSU personnel file shows her being a part-time dispatcher, then a full-time clerk typist, and then a full-time secretary, which, to be honest, is probably the only job that was available to her in the late 70s in a campus police force. But still, you shouldn't lie about it. And even if you were truthfully a part-time university police officer for 2 to 3 years, maybe that's not much of a long. I mean, it's not nothing, but campus police sort of deal with a separate set of problems than municipal police, let's say. Anyway, in 1980, it was because she didn't do any of that anyhow, so it doesn't matter. In 1980, Davenport started as a dispatcher for the Murfreesboro Police Department. Then she took another job, not in law enforcement, but in the law department for Nashville, investigating financial claims that might include anything from car accidents to slip and falls. At night, Davenport went to law school. She graduated in 1986. That same year, she told lawyers in a deposition, "I started with the feds." Let's find out if that's true. She told radio listeners that for 8 years she was, quote, with the U.S. Department of Justice, or rather, the U.S. Justice Department, where I analyzed and tracked and helped identify serial killers. Ooh. But this job wasn't with the Justice Department. Her employer, Regional Information Sharing Systems, received federal funding but isn't a federal agency. She then became a private investigator, handling, quote, mostly divorces, she told lawyers. In a deposition, Davenport said she first took the bar exam about a year after finishing law school. She failed, then kept trying. How many times have you taken the bar? An attorney asked her. Interestingly, it's portrayed here with I guess, the stammer that went along with it, like as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. How many times have you taken the bar? The attorney asked her. I passed on the 5th time, she said. It takes some, not everybody passes the first time, right? I think JFK Jr. passed on the 5th time, I think. Look what happened to him. Anyway, she was admitted to practice law in 1995, 9 years after getting her law degree. That's a while. In 1998, she became a juvenile court referee, akin to a judge. One of the county's judges appointed her. Asked why, he recently said, I really can't go back and tell you. That's a weird answer. Okay. The following year, Rutherford County violated federal law 191 times by keeping kids locked up too long, according to a story later published by the Tennessean. By law, children held for such minor acts as truancy were to appear before a judge within 24 hours and be released no more than a day after that. The newspaper interviewed Davenport, who estimated half those violations occurred because a kid had cursed her or someone else. For cursing, she said, she typically sentenced kids to 2 to 10 days in jail. Was I in violation, she said. Heck yes. But am I going to allow a child to cuss anyone out? Heck no. So to hell with law, federal, state, or otherwise. We're just going to lock people up because I don't like cussing. Well, there was nobody there to say any different to her. She was the judge, there's no jury, and who cares about Rutherford County, I guess. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Shall we continue learning about Judge Davenport here? She seemed like an odd lady. In August of 2000, less than 3 months after the story was published, Rutherford County elected Davenport to the newly created job of juvenile court judge. So they saw that she was putting kids in jail for cussing and approved of putting her on the bench as the first elected judge for juvenile court. Her opponent, a major in the sheriff's department, was later charged with sex crimes against minors. So it's hard to argue against that then. And in a plea deal got probation. Davenport has not had another opponent since. I guess they all looked and said, look what happened to him. That's bad news. With juveniles, police in Tennessee typically avoid cuffs and custody, particularly in less serious cases. They instead serve summonses instructing kids and their parents to show up in court. But that wasn't the routine in Rutherford County. When the Murfreesboro officers arrested kids at Hobgood, they were following Davenport's process, and that's in quotes, process. Arrest, transport to the detention center for screening, then file charging papers. It is so ordered, Davenport wrote in a 2003 memo about her instructions. 4 years later, she declared that even kids accused of minor violations like truancy must be taken into custody and transported to jail. That's interesting. So it is so ordered, she wrote in a memo, which means that she was trying to pass her memo off as a court order, which I guess it really isn't. But whatever. You're real good at lawyering. Davenport once told Murfreesboro's Daily News Journal, I know I'm harsh. I'm very harsh. I like to think I'm fair, but I'm tough. I like to think you're fair. You're just not. In 2016, the Tennessee Board of Judicial Conduct publicly reprimanded Davenport. In a family law matter, a father's lawyers had asked to move his case to another county. By law, they were allowed to, but Davenport called the father and or his attorneys a sneaky snake. By gum, you're a sneaky snake, the reprimand said. What's more, she ordered that a transcript of her words be forwarded, possibly tipping the next judge to her animosity. The reprimand found that Davenport's intemperate conduct threatened the right to a fair hearing. So in other words, she has no judicial demeanor, right? She's should be removed from the bench, basically. In some other cases, appeals courts have taken Davenport to task through unusually blunt language. In one, Davenport was overturned twice. Davenport, finding that I'm glad they have this appeals available anyway. Davenport, finding that a mother had neglected her daughter, granted custody to another couple. 2 higher courts disagreed and ordered Davenport to reunify the mother and child. Instead, Davenport terminated the mother's parental rights. The other couple then adopted the girl after being exhorted by Davenport to move quickly, according to a state court of appeals opinion. So before I can be overturned again, quickly, just take this kid and say you adopted her. The adoption went through while a challenge to Davenport's parental termination ruling was still pending. In the second go-round, I don't think that should happen. If there's a termination ruling under appeal, I don't even know if you can have the adoption go through, but she just insisted that it should. In the second go-round, a state appeals court judge made clear his displeasure, saying during oral argument, "Our little system works pretty simply. If a higher court tells a lower court to do something, the lower court does it. That didn't happen in this case," he said. 2 months later, the appeals court overruled Davenport for a second time, saying it was troubled by the proceedings to this point. The court ordered Davenport to reunite the mother and child expeditiously. Davenport, through a spokesperson, declined our interview request, to which we attached 13 pages of questions. Previously, when asked about the county's arrest practices, Davenport told lawyers that she, quote, "can't tell law enforcement what to do," but she issues them a memo saying it's a court order. She told a local newspaper that her court produces a lot of success stories. She told radio listeners, "I want the children that come in front of me to leave better than they came in." Well, it's nice, but she's not helping. Chapter 3. Yeah, that's the charge. Where are we in time here? Friday, April 15th, 2016, in the Judicial Commissioner's office in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. On the same Friday afternoon as 3 police officers jammed into the assistant principal's office at Hobgood Elementary School, 3 other people huddled in another office a few miles away to discuss what charges these kids could face. Crystal Templeton, the police officer investigating the video, wanted to arrest every kid who watched the fight and, quote, "get them all in front of Davenport," she would later say during an internal police investigation. Charging them was helping them, Templeton believed, because juvenile court is about rehabilitation. Templeton thought an appropriate charge might be conspiracy to commit assault. But then she met with Amy Anderson and Sherry Hamlet, 2 judicial commissioners authorized by Rutherford County to issue arrest warrants. Anderson told Templeton that she thought the only child who could be charged with conspiring was the kid who recorded the video of the fight on a cell phone. So they went in search of another charge, with Hamlet checking the state's criminal code on a computer. Templeton had joined the Murfreesboro Police Department in 1998, when she was 21. By the time of the arrests at Hobgood, she had been disciplined at least 37 times, including 9 suspensions. How many times was she suspended? 9 times. She once left a loaded pistol on the seat of a patrol car. Womp womp. According to her personnel file. That's a gun fail. During a pursuit, she failed to turn on her dash cam. Another time, she lost control of her patrol car and hit a Ford Explorer, which can explode, so watch out for those, which in turn hit a Nissan Pathfinder, while Templeton's patrol unit, spinning, smacked a Toyota Sequoia. It's like a used car salesman here. In all, 4 cars were damaged and 7 people injured, including Templeton. Wow. In the lead-up to the Hobgood arrests, Garrett, the school's principal, had heard grumbling about Templeton. Templeton was a school resource officer, not at Hobgood, but at 2 other schools in Murfreesboro. Great. 2 schools' principals, or both schools' principals, complained that Templeton was often absent. Well, that sounds like a blessing in disguise. Meanwhile, one of Hobgood's resource officers warned Garrett that Templeton's handling of the case was going to cause a crap storm, but no one says crap storm. But that officer didn't share her concerns with police higher-ups. She believed Templeton's sergeant always made excuses for her, so what was the point? Templeton had begun investigating on Wednesday, 2 days earlier. To try and identify all the kids, she asked around at schools and in the neighborhood where the fight took place. One parent she approached for help was EJ's mom. Templeton assured her no one was in any trouble. She just wanted to give the kids a talking to. EJ's mom would say later. EJ herself, who was with her mom during this meeting, said she had been there. It was her on the video saying, "Stop, Tay-Tay." On a piece of paper On the hood of Templeton's patrol car, EJ and another girl who was with them listed the onlookers. And that was Templeton's investigation. My case is the video and the list, she would say later, although she couldn't match any bystanders to any image in the video. The victim, the boy being punched, told Templeton the kids were all friends now. Templeton told him she understood. She then asked the child, "Do you think that there needs to be some consequences for what happened?" She would later recall, and he said yes. Yeah, but not for the kids who watched the fight. Jeez. Templeton wanted guidance. She needed it, that's for sure. She believed the boys throwing punches were too young to be charged with the crime. An assistant district attorney agreed. The assistant DA also told Templeton she didn't believe there was any single charge appropriate for all the kids gathered around, but Templeton still wanted to charge them all. Inside the Judicial Commissioner's office, Hamlet discovered an alternative to conspiracy to commit assault. Her search turned up a Tennessee statute defining criminal responsibility for conduct of another. It says, in part, a person is criminally responsible for an offense committed by another if the person causes or aids an innocent or irresponsible person to engage in the offense, or directs another to commit the offense, or fails to make a reasonable effort to prevent commission of the offense. Aha! Hamlet shared her find with Templeton. They went through the statute line by line with Anderson joining in, like this is a major federal case now. I looked at the charge to the best of my ability from my experience and was like, yeah, that's the charge, Templeton would say later on. When she subsequently apprised higher up in the police department, the higher up wasn't so sure, but he didn't warn her off. No one ever said no, Templeton said later, adding, if somebody told me no, stop, I would have stopped, unlike the kids in the video, right? In the United States, it is typically the prosecutor's job to review a police investigation and decide what charges, if any, to file. But Tennessee allows counties to hire judicial commissioners to fill this role. From issuing warrants to setting bail to conducting probable cause hearings, Rutherford County's judicial commissioners can take on tasks that traditionally fall to judges or prosecutors without needing the legal training of either. County judges recommend people for the job. County commissioners appoint them. Rutherford County opens the job to anyone with a Tennessee driver's license and a high school diploma, supplemented by some college-level coursework or vocational training and some office work. Anderson, a county employee since 1998, was disciplined shortly before this case. According to investigative records, she had passed a note to a sheriff's clerk. The clerk tore it up, then left with Anderson. Someone fished the note's scraps from the trash and taped them together. The note read, "Could I get a few? If not, that's fine. It's my hip." What? In an internal sheriff's investigation, the clerk admitted giving Anderson 2 prescription painkillers. Aha! That was illegal, a lieutenant wrote. He informed the county judge, who said they would handle the situation administratively. Anderson received a letter of warning, according to her personnel file. Hamlet started as a judicial commissioner in 2008, making $8.50 an hour. Her application listed a high school diploma and no college. Her previous job was in a small-town post office where her responsibilities included computer work and general office duties. When Hamlet came up with criminal responsibility for conduct of another as a possible charge, there was a problem. It's not an actual charge. There is no such crime. Well, that is a problem, isn't it? It is rather a basis upon which someone can be accused of a crime. For example, a person who caused someone else to commit robbery would be charged with robbery, not criminal responsibility. But in the judicial commissioner's office that Friday afternoon, 10 petitions were issued, each charging a child with, quote, criminal responsibility. The petitions didn't distinguish the kids' actions. The documents were cookie cutter, saying each child, quote, encouraged and caused 2 other juveniles to commit an assault. This is essentially the rough equivalent of taking, our internet lawyers who say that deleting a tweet or blocking someone from access to Facebook is a First Amendment violation when it really isn't. And if you've gone to law school or had any legal training and would have learned that the First Amendment is enforceable as against government action, not private action, then you wouldn't make that mistake. But here they're not trained and they just are given the job anyway. I mean, I don't know who else would take the job for $8.50 an hour, but basically just they had no understanding of criminal law and how it works. So here you go. Now you're all under arrest. After the 4 arrests at Hobgood, other children named in the petitions were brought in by their parents or rounded up by police. Templeton, through her lawyer, declined to comment. Anderson and Hamlet did not respond to interview requests. The supervisor in the Judicial Commissioner's office, did you hear me say that correctly? Judicial Commissioner's office, told us the two had no comment, and neither did he. On Saturday, the day after the scene at Hobgood, police went to the homes of a sister and brother, who were 12-year-old twins. In court records, they would be identified as JB number 1 and JB number 2. Oh, they both have the same initials as twins. Oh, well. Officers arrested and handcuffed both children, even as the girl cried and begged to stay with her mother, and the mother pleaded with the police not to use handcuffs. The mother recently said, "It hurt me to my heart for them to take my kids." 2 of her other children watched the arrests, and as did 3 of her nieces. Afterward, her other children had nightmares of being arrested, she said. The officers put the twins in a patrol car and took them to the juvenile detention center to be processed. And now chapter 4. We will hold the juvenile, it says. When police took the 12-year-old twins to the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center, that fabulous place in the video, on Saturday, April 16th, 2016, the odds that either would be jailed were long, at least under Tennessee law. Recognizing the harm that can come from incarcerating kids, Tennessee lawmakers, no progressives, they, by the way, have placed narrow limits on when a child accused of being delinquent can be held in a secure lockdown prior to receiving a court hearing. The child must fit one of 6 categories, precisely defined. They include being a jail escapee, being wanted elsewhere for a felony offense, or being accused on substantial evidence of a crime resulting in serious injury or death. These 2 12-year-olds were charged on negligible evidence with a crime that's not actually a crime for something in which no one was seriously hurt. Rutherford County, however, has its own system for deciding whether to keep a child under lock and key. Its written procedure, imprecise and broad, boiled down to whether a child was considered by jailers to be a, quote, true, in all capitals, T-R-U-E, a true threat. That is pretty vague. Jailers allowed the 12-year-old girl to go home, but they locked up her twin brother. Of the 10 children charged in this case, all black, 4 were girls and 6 were boys. Every girl was released. Of the boys, 4 were jailed, according to court records. Those 4 boys became a small part of a big group. In the fiscal year that encompassed April 2016, Rutherford County jailed 986 children for a total of 7,932 days. JB number 2, the 12-year-old boy, spent 2 nights in the detention center, court records show. While there, he was placed in solitary confinement as punishment for standing at his cell's window. What a big punishment he needs for that. A lawsuit would later allege. We recently interviewed JB number 2, whose name is Jacorius Brinkley. He's 18 now, and it's okay. He's okay with us using his name. A guard, Jacorius said, kept walking past his cell, saying, you can't be by the door. You got to sit down. Why is that? I mean, you're locked up, right? The person who runs the detention center is Lynn Duke. Davenport initially picked someone else, but her first appointee was arrested on a drug charge only hours after receiving the congratulations of county commissioners. Wow. The commission, and not the judicial commissioners who write the complaints against the guy. That would be pretty funny too. Congratulations, I'm writing your arrest warrant right now. Davenport, Davenport quickly named Duke as the replacement. Duke, a former youth services officer, became director on January 1st, 2001, and has remained in that role ever since. Duke reports to Davenport, but does not consult her daily. In 2005, Duke emailed the judge to say he was feeling guilty for not checking in more. Okay. If you need me to do anything, please tell me, Duke wrote, to which Davenport replied, "Girl, if I had any concerns or problems, you would hear from me. You do a great job." And I think that's got to be 5 exclamation points after all caps, "You do a great job." So, okay, she approves of her. When Duke first became director, the county detained kids in a deteriorated 19th century jail separate from the court building. A local newspaper editorial bemoaned the sight this produced in the public square. Kids shackled together in orange jumpsuits, shuffling along the sidewalk and into the judicial building. Not that we're afraid to see juveniles cuffed and heading toward justice, but it is a disturbing thing that could be avoided if juvenile court could be held at the detention center, editorials said. In 2003, Rutherford County hired a consulting firm to help design a new detention center. The next year, the firm produced a lengthy report alerting Rutherford County that it was locking up kids at an exceptionally high rate. Jailing children should be the last resort of a number of options, the firm wrote. Less restrictive alternatives not only save money, they're more effective in reducing recidivism, making them better for children and the community. Scale down, the report recommended. Build a 35-bed juvenile detention center with room to add on later. Also, build shelter care, 10 beds, in a residential setting for runaways or other kids who pose no real threat to public safety. In 2005, Rutherford County dropped the consulting firm and rejected its advice. The county opted for a 64-bed detention center with no shelter care. The center, attached to new courtrooms for Davenport and her magistrate, opened in 2008. The complex cost, coupled with that of a nearby correctional work center for adults, was $23.3 million. Duke and Davenport have gushed about their new workplace. A dream come true, Davenport called it. They offer public tours. You'll see booking. Bring your family. Have a little piece of cake, Davenport told radio listeners in a 2015 segment. They also lauded the jail staff. We are a well-oiled machine, so there's not much to report, Duke told county commissioners. On occasion, news reports have revealed embarrassing staff breakdowns. Duke fired one officer who pepper-sprayed a kid in his cell, after which the kid chased the officer down and beat him up. Yikes. I mean, I guess I'm kind of glad that he did that, but good job confining your prisoners. The officer, in a statement, said he was confident he followed procedure. In another case, Duke promoted a corporal to sergeant despite a troubling disciplinary record. Duke then fired the sergeant after she entered a cell, removed her belt, and struck a child with it. According to an internal investigation's findings, the sergeant denied hitting the child, saying she had just removed her belt and made a popping sound with it. Okay. When we pulled this officer's personnel file, we discovered she had originally been recommended for hire by Davenport, who wrote a letter lauding her professional demeanor and enthusiasm for the world of juvenile law. Right, enthusiasm. That's good. Everyone loves that. Which is really something weird, and you shouldn't have. But okay. When the new center opened in 2008, Duke incorporated a filter system into the jail's written manual. When police arrest a child, they bring the child to jail. There, under the system, staff decide whether to hold the child before a detention hearing, which could take place days later. Say a child is hauled in for something minor, like skipping school. Under the filter system, the child would be locked up if deemed unruly. But the filter system defines unruly simply as, you guessed it, a true threat, while true threat is not defined at all. So any child, no matter the charge, who is considered a true threat, whatever that means, can end up being locked up. Plus, the police can weigh in. In a 2013 email, Duke encouraged sheriff's officers to let her staff know if they wanted a child detained. If they say, I really want this kid held, 9 times out of 10, we can make that happen. Yay. She went further in a memo to school resource officers, writing, even if we would normally release a juvenile, anytime a local law enforcement officer requests a juvenile be detained and agrees to come to court to testify, we will hold the juvenile. Detention center staff could be quizzed on the filter system when up for promotion or disciplined for not applying it as written, according to personnel records. The staff member who made her way up to sergeant before being fired said in a deposition, we were told, when in doubt, hold them, because it's better to hold a kid that should have been released than release a child that should have been held. It's actually probably backwards. In 2016, Jacorius Brinkley joined in a lawsuit asking for the filter system to be stopped. When Duke was deposed in 2017, she called the system a guideline. Asked when it applied and what it dictated, Duke repeatedly said, depends on the situation. Well, is it your policy or not? A lawyer asked Duke. No. Yes. It's a policy to use it when necessary, Duke said. Okay. They know what they're doing there. Duke declined our request for an interview, writing in an email, I appreciate your interest in Rutherford County and its youth, but declined to participate at this time. Elsewhere, she had consistently expressed pride in her operation, saying Rutherford County has the best juvenile detention center in the state of Tennessee. Rutherford County doesn't just jail its own kids, it also contracts with other counties to detain their children, charging $175 a day. If we have empty beds, we will fill them with a paying customer, Duke said at one public meeting. Paying customer. Duke reports monthly to the county commission's Public Safety Committee. At these meetings, we watched more than 100, going back 12 years. Commissioners have asked regularly about the number of beds filled. Just like a hotel, one commissioner said at the jail, with breakfast provided. And it's not a continental, added a second. I don't even know why that's supposed to be funny, but okay. At another meeting, a commissioner said it would be cool if, instead of being a cost center, the jail could be a profit center. When, at one meeting, Duke said, we get a lot of business from a particular county, a commissioner chuckled at Duke's word choice. Business, he said. This brought awkward laughter from other commissioners, leading the committee chair to say, hey, it's a business, generating revenue. That brings us to Chapter 5. Don't think we're going to get all the way through it, but just thought I'd add it on our way into the weekend. This really should seal the deal. You're going to want to read the rest of this. Chapter 5 is called They're Not Coming Out Better Than They Went In, so that ain't working. Back to Friday, April 15th, 2016. She had tried to stop the scuffle. Remember who we're talking about? The evidence was right there in the video. Stop, Tay-Tay, right, over and over again. Then, asked by police for help, she had helped. The police had responded by arresting her as she vomited and cried, saying that she had encouraged and caused the fight, that she's on video saying that they should stop. And she's the one that identified herself and gave them the list of all the other people who were there. But she gets arrested nonetheless. When EJ was taken to the detention center, she was processed along with CC, her best friend. Jail staff recorded EJ's name and birth date. She was 10 years old. Conducted a 16-point search and confiscated her jewelry, all her small rings. Then they placed the 2 fourth graders in a holding area. The air, the bench, everything was cold, EJ remembers. She heard buzzing and doors opening and shutting. EJ and CC sat and cried. EJ, who had tried to stop the fight, and CC, who, as her sister had told Principal Garrett, was not even there. She had been at a pizza party celebrating her basketball team's championship. EJ remembers CC saying something to her sister in a nearby holding cell, and she remembers the jail staff's reaction. The grown-ups in charge told the children, be quiet. It was like a demanding. That's what it says, EJ recalls. EJ was released the day of her arrest. Come Monday, she was afraid to go back to school, worried the police might pick her up again. After the outcry over these arrests, the charge against EJ was dismissed. What do you know? As were the charges against all the other kids. But EJ's mom could see the signs of lasting trauma. EJ had bad dreams about the arrest. She didn't trust the police. What do you know? For 2 or 3 months, EJ received counseling. In July of 2016, 10-year-old EJ, through her mother, sued Officer Templeton in federal court. Her lawsuit was later expanded into a class action against Rutherford County. Her lawyers wanted to know how many kids were there who, like EJ, had been improperly arrested. How many kids, like Ja'Coria Brinkley, had been improperly jailed. The lawyers gathered large samples of arrest and detention records from an 11-year period ending in December of 2017. Then they extrapolated. They would eventually estimate that kids had been wrongly arrested 500 times. And that was just for kids arrested by the sheriff's office. This estimate didn't account for other law enforcement agencies in the county that followed Davenport's process. As for how many times the juvenile detention center had improperly locked up kids through its filter system, the lawyers estimated that number at 1,500. That's some filter they're working there. I guess it's not working all that well. And wow, example after example after example of these kids being improperly arrested and locked up. Lots more still to come if you want to read this thing. And, of course, lots more news still to come with Justice Putnam bringing you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next right here on NetReach Radio. We'll see what they've got in store for you after this brief announcement and whatever I can blurt out before the music ends.
NetReachRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yes, big news here. Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe has won back his full pension from the Biden administration as part of a settlement of the lawsuit arising from his vindictive political firing by Trump. Lots more, of course, from around the country and around the world, as always, with our favorite chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam.